Alright, everybody. I'd like to welcome all bowling fans to the last video of my Advantage Bowling series. Now, there's a reason why I call the stuff I make about bowling stupid bowling opinions, because I don't take myself that seriously when it comes to this. Okay, I'm not an authority. I'm not one of these guys who's like, oh, I do bowling ball reviews and I'm a big authority of it because I kind of bowl in scratch events, but I never win them. So, whatever. I'm not like that. Okay? I'm just some dude who's been bowling since I was a little kid, who has seen the sport grow and grow and grow, and who has a set of opinions about it that I believe can help the majority of casual or competitive bowlers. Okay? Now, in my last video, before I even go any further, too, I'd like to thank my man. I'd like to kind of plug a certain tournament that I go to all the time in the in Northeast Florida, in the Palm Coast area, called KBK. It's run by a man named Curtis Hughes. This is just, I guess, he runs like handicap sport shot stuff and sweepers and everything. In I think November or October or something like that, he did a variation of Midnight Bowler Society, which was really fun. Christian Ascona was there, big pro bowler. He was there. Yeah, that guy, and he did pretty well. I think one of his teammates was there. It was on my pair too. So shout out to Curtis Hughes. He always runs good tournaments out in Palm Coast. If you're anywhere near there, if you're even like a few hours away and you want to bowl a fun sweeper with a very fair format that allows almost anybody to win on challenging sport shots, some of them on house shots too, then yeah, like I definitely recommend going to Curtis Hughes' tournament. KBK is what he calls it. I think it's called. You can find it on Facebook too. I think it's called KBK Bowling Tournaments. And the KBK is named after him, Curtis with a K. Bentley, that's his kid, his son, who is like a really cool little dude. And I think his girlfriend also, or something like that, or his wife has a K in her name or something like that. I don't know. Anyways, just wanted to plug that. Go to one of those tournaments. I'll see you there at one of them. I'm pretty sure I'm going to go to a few sometime this year. And before I even go into this, I want to wish everybody a good second half of league. You know what I mean? We're halfway home in it. You know what I mean? You got a new year, so if you want to learn new stuff, that kind of stuff. Let's say raise your average, that kind of thing. I'm always down for anyone improving. I'm not gonna sit here and be like, oh well, this one is down. I'm not like that. You know what I mean? I want anyone watching this video, even if you don't agree with me, in fact, especially if you don't agree with me, to succeed in this great sport anyways. You know what I mean? So in the last video, I explained very thoroughly and very detailed why you should never run an average higher than 205 in bowling. Never, you should not do it for a whole bunch of reasons. Okay, and it'll be somewhere either in the either in the video or in the description of the last part or whatever. I'll probably make a playlist containing it all too. Because if you average anywhere higher than 205 or 208 or 207 or 209 or whatever, like let's say I average higher than 210, but I go with 205 because it's just an easier, for me it makes more sense with 205. If you average any higher than 205 and you want to bowl in handicap stuff, you're going to be bowling at a disadvantage. And here's a good reason why. Here's a good anecdote about that. So one of my buddies went and bowled doubles tournament, and the handicap was 90% of 220. I'm going to go over the history of handicaps and bowling in the next slide. And, excuse me. I just worked out, or I came back from the gym, so I'm like, breathing is still kind of, you're kind of short of breath after you work out, especially when you're lifting heavy weights. And his average, he came in with I think a 189 average. His doubles partner came in with a 2.0, with a 2.12 average. Do you think they got enough handicap to actually like place well among the field? No, they didn't. Even if they shot their average. So the one dude, he actually averaged a little bit under 200. Good for him. His doubles partner also averaged 200, but he went in with 212. There's a problem there. And as you're going to see, the difference between a 200 and a 230 is literally just like one or two more strikes and maybe a couple, maybe like one less open frame or one more spare. We're going to see and explore the stats in detail when it comes to this, okay? Okay, so moving on here. All right, so, and that's a question that's on the mind of a lot of bowlers, and we've been trying to figure it out for years and years and years. What should the industry standard for handicap be? There we go. What should the industry standard for it be? The answer is going to shock you. The answer is going to be like, are you kidding me? But you're going to find out exactly why that is coming up. But let's go over the history of handicaps and some common handicaps, okay? These are the most common numbers that you're going to see in any given league or any given tournament that's contested on a house shot. Some sport shots also use this, but if you anywhere in the United States that is handicap league, handicap tournament that's contested on a typical house shot, that kind of stuff, you're going to see one of these three numbers. You're going to see the first one. The oldest of these is 90% of the 210. This was the most common handicap that was used until the mid to late 2000s. And that was when bowling ball technology was still growing, okay? Up until the mid to late 2000s, you still had a lot of old guys throwing urethane stuff, even some polyester stuff, plastic stuff. There were reactive resin stuff going around, but they were still kind of doing experiments, you know what I mean? Like, if you want a really aggressive ball, you would go to a particle ball, in 2005, or in 2002, or even in 2007 in some cases. And bowling ball technology was still growing. Scores were still not, like, stupid high like they are now, because you could just buy whatever you need at the shop. You don't even need to worry about layouts anymore, because all the layouts are pretty much uniform when it comes to any kind of bowlers, to where, like, in my opinion, it's going to be a really, like, this is going to be another stupid bowling opinion of mine. I don't think you should need certification to be a PSO, to be a pro shop operator. Why is that? Because layouts aren't the way they used to be. You can't put a balance hole anymore. You can't use Rico drilling. You can't use other stuff. You gotta. Cores are not as complicated as they used to be 15, 20 years ago. Everything's pretty much the same now. It's all cover stock. In fact, cover stock is like at least 75%, and surface. Cover stock and surface is like 90%, or is like 75% of represents like 75% of a bowling ball's motion, total motion. So anyways, but 90% of 210, it used to favor all bowlers. It really did. It used to favor all bowlers because scores weren't as high. 300 was rare. 800 was very rare. Now you'll see a perfect game, at least one thrown in any given league. Wasn't like this 15, 20 years ago, or 25 years ago, from the late 90s until like 2008 or so. But things changed, and now, currently 90% of 210 favors scratch bowlers over casual bowlers. Why is that? It's because if your average is like 220 and the handicap is 90% of 210, you're getting no handicap, nothing. But 220 average means you can reliably shoot over 220. Now, someone who's averaging 180, and you're going to see this in the stats, they cannot reliably shoot over 220. In fact, they can't really reliably shoot over 200. In fact, they will. In fact, if they encounter over under, if they encounter wet dry, if they're bowling in a wood in a center that has wood lanes and they're rev dominant, God rest their soul, they're gonna have to loft the gutter cap right out of the gate. And if they don't know how to loft the gutter cap correctly, guess what? They're gonna be throwing plastic, and now plastic doesn't have the hitting power like most resin balls do, unless you're throwing a radical spy. They're going to struggle, right? Right. So that's why 90% of 210 now favors scratch bowlers over casual bowlers. Because the scratch bowlers know that, okay, that they're getting nothing. But the other bowlers who are substantially worse than them are not getting as much as other stuff. 90% of 220. This was the industry standard for the last 15 or so years. And you walk into any league or tournament like from like the mid to late 2000s on until today, you're going to have 90% 220. A lot of sports shot stuff uses 90% 220. One of the biggest megabucks tournaments I used to go to in Orlando all the time, and at Boardwalk, used 90% 220. Okay. And it's still followed by, we'll say about half or so of any given USBC league or tournament. You know, like there's a good chance that you're going to come across something that's 90% of 220 in a tournament. Okay. In my opinion, 90% of 220 is the worst. It doesn't favor scratch bowlers and it doesn't favor casuals. It creates a little bit more equal ground between scratch bowlers and casual bowlers, but it doesn't really do much for either one. I mean, yeah, it's not. Hang on, let me turn this heater off. It's pretty warm. It's pretty cold in my apartment. Through no fault of anyone else. It's just next to a big window. It's cold out. Yeah, that kind of stuff. That was like really getting on my nerves. But it doesn't really. It doesn't provide enough for either one. One of my one of the most popular leagues in my city had 90% of 220 last year. No one liked it. It got bumped back up to 90% of I think 230 or 240, and that worked out a lot better, or it is working out a lot better for the majority. Which in league the majority is casuals, not scratch. And I'll tell you why that is. Okay. I forgot I have roommates here, so it's like really dumb. Alright, cool. We're good. I left my door a little bit open, just make sure. Okay, now, 90% of 230. 90% of 230 is starting to become the industry standard for handicap in bowling. And most of my leagues have been using this handicap for the last 8 or so years, since 2014 or so. Actually, yeah, like just about last decade or so. Every now and then I'll run into a league that uses 90 of 220 or 90 of 240, but from 2014 until now, most of the leagues I've been bowling in have used 90% of 230. 90% of 230 favors casual bowlers, but not scratch bowlers, because of how much handicap these casual bowlers can have. If your average is 90% is like 150, you're getting what? 90% of 230. So 230 minus 150 is 80, and times 0.9. At least you're getting about 75 pins per game of handicap. But if your average is 205, what are you getting? 20 something? And how difficult is it to reliably shoot 230, 240, 250? 250, you need at least 10 strikes. You need at least 9 strikes, as you're going to see. It's not easy to do. All right? Not easy to do. There's a lot of luck involved in that. So 90% of 230 will, because of that, 90% of 230 favors casual bowlers, but does not favor scratch bowlers in the slightest. Which is why a lot of scratch bowlers will groan about it. They'll be like, "Oh, come on, 90 to 230, really? 90 to 240, it's the same kind of concept. Only 90 of 240. If there is if there's a limit on handicap, 90 of 240 is good. As you're gonna see, you need limits on handicap. So there you go. So with 90% of 230 slowly becoming the industry standard for handicap, with 90% of 220 still kind of being the industry standard for the last 15 or so years, it's created and combined with bowling ball technology now allowing anybody who has some semblance of fundamentals to pull a 200 out of their ass if they can, if they just happen to strike 7 times, 6 times, which is very common, even in sport shots that's common. It's created a problem. Okay, it's created a problem that's been persisting for the last decade or so. That is the 210 220 problem. So I explained this a little bit in the last video, but I'm going to go into it into even bigger detail now. If you average 210 to 220 in your leagues or tournaments use any of those 3 aforementioned handicaps, you will be at a disadvantage. It's not a matter of might be. It's a matter of will be. You are gambling against the house if you average that. Now, if you're at 200, 205, might be okay. If you're at 230, you possess the skills and equipment and other knowledge to reliably shoot as high as you need to, so that's fine. But if you have those if you're averaging 210 to 220, I keep forgetting I have to point at the screen. If you're averaging 210 to 220, you will not have enough pins in any situation if the handicap is 90 of 210, 90 of 220, 90 of 230, or anything in between those, by the way. So even if it's 90 of 215, that kind of deal. All right. And also, additionally, if you average 210 to 220, that usually means that you have mostly good sets with some bad ones and some fantastic ones in league. Most of your sets going to be what? 650, 670, right? 630. A bad night will be like a 570. A really good night will be 7. A fantastic night will be like a 750, right? That's when you average 250. That kind of deal. And to kind of drive this point home, in 2017-18, there was one house that I averaged 212 at because I was a speed dominant bowler at the time, and it was just my bread and butter. Used wood lanes. I was able to throw the ball as hard as I could. I was able to throw a very mellow, non-aggressive, or a resin ball that wasn't aggressive, but it was also a pearl symmetric. It was the Brunswick Strike King I threw. And it was 16 pounds too. It's hilarious. And in that house, or across all the leagues I bowled, I only shot about 8 or so 700 sets. And I shot maybe 4 or so honors scores, which to me is 260 plus or an 800 set. So I only had about 4 or so 269s, 270s, 280s, that kind of deal. A lot of 250s, a lot of 230s, a lot of 240s, that kind of stuff. And I didn't shoot any 800s. The closest I got to that was 778, and I missed the 800 by a strike and a spare. I whiffed a 4-pin, and I didn't strike. And I had a game that should have been a 279, but it was a 259, and I didn't strike. That's literally the difference between the difference between a 250 and a 270 is literally runs 1 strike. Literally. Okay? And it's like I said, I was able to reliably shoot anything between 630 and 670. That was to me a solid night. Okay, but the super high sets, 720, even 7, I guess 700 plus, and honor scores, like I said, anything over 260 or anything over 800, those were still rare. And this is the experience for most who average 210 to 220. It's like I said before in that in the doubles tournament I was talking about a few minutes ago. The one dude who came in with a 212, he doesn't shoot a lot of honor scores at all. Most of his sets are like 640, 660, 680, 675, 615, something like that. Honor scores, not that many. I've seen him shoot like maybe like 4 279s last year. That's about it. No perfects, you know. That's the experience, and that's why if you run into an event or league that has those 3 industry standard average handicaps, it's going to be a struggle because you will not have enough pins. So we need a solution. We need a solution to this. You can't just favor the casuals by having 90% of 230 as an industry standard of handicap. It doesn't really work out that way, okay? You can't just favor the scratch crew with 90% of 210, and you know, if you're like just beginning, and you know, tough titty, says the kitty, like that does not work. Like that does not work. That's way too. It's one-dimensional thinking, and it doesn't. It's not inclusive. We need bowling to be inclusive. We need bowling that we need to appreciate the scratch guys who still bowl leagues, who still want to bowl handicap stuff alongside their scratch stuff because it's just more fun for them. They want to be seen as a leader in their communities, in their bowling communities, their local bowling communities, that kind of stuff. You know, or they want okay. I'll even say this: if they want some good practice for the PBA regional they're about to bowl at, you know, that's fine. You know what I mean? We need to accommodate for them, and we need to accommodate for the casuals because casuals are very important too. So, if bowling wants to grow, it needs a brand new industry standard for handicap, as well as hard and fast maximum handicaps for all bowlers of all genders or ages or whatever you can come up with. That handicap is one of 2 numbers, based on some numbers that I've crunched that you're going to see in future slides. It's either 90% of 250, yeah, we're going there, 90% of 250, or 70% of 200. Now, if I pitched these numbers and I didn't put handicap maximums, then yeah, like lulls, maximum lulls, because yeah, that would be really, really stupid, okay? But handicap needs to have a max. I'm going to go back to the Megabucks tournament that I was talking about that took place in Orlando for like about, Jesus Christ, it had to be like 35 years before they had their final one in 2020. Like, it was a long time. It was a lot of bowlers there. A lot of established pro bowlers came out of there. I've met dozens of national and international pros in that tournament. I've met Rhino Page at the Megabucks tournament I'm talking about. It's called UBA Classic, by the way. In fact, there's footage of me bowling against a local pro who kind of, I think, has gone to a couple of national tournaments on this channel. It was in 2016. I've met Rhino Page there. I've met Shannon O'Keefe there. I've met Stephanie Johnson there. I've met, who else? Christian Oscona. I've met him a few times there. And a few other here and gone now. I don't really remember right now. But This tournament that I'm talking about was Anthony Casso, um, Chris Polizzi there, Sean what's his name? I don't remember his last name. Nauman, and he's like he's friends with Brad and Kyle. You know those guys. If it took place in the Midwest instead of in Central Florida, best believe I'd meet dudes like J.R. Raymond there. You know, that kind of stuff. It's a kind of tournament that even pros went to because they knew that they had handicap there. And that tournament had a maximum handicap. It was 55 for men, 65 for women. That means you couldn't just go in there with 90 pins of handicap per game and go out guns blazing and manage to shoot even and just beat everyone down. No. They had 55 for men and 65 for women. To me, it should have just been 60 for a max, but that's about it. So, why 60 pins per game? Why did I arrive at that number? So, if you get 4 strikes in a row from the 9th and 10th frames, if you go all the way out, you get 60 pins. That's the most pins you can possibly knock down in the last 2 frames of bowling. And just to give you, just to clarify things, whatever. What's 60? What's 60 divided by 300? 20%. So almost a quarter of a perfect game is done in the 9th and 10th frames. So if you're giving someone more than 60 pins per game of handicap, that is stupid. That is dumb. Because 60 pins means you're giving them the 9th and 10th frames. You're saying, hey, you got 4 in a row in the 9th and 10th frames anyways. You know what I mean? So, even if you gave like a 170 average bowler that, they can do some work with that because if they shoot their average 170, right, add 60 to that, and now they've shot like a 230 something. Yeah. So, 90% of now both of these kind of help in different ways. 90% of 250 would with a max of 60 pins per game would definitively help scratch bowlers over would slightly help scratch bowlers over those lower averages. Okay, like if someone's average 230 and the handicap is 90% of 250, they're still getting a lot of pins, but they can only get 60. So if you're averaging like 180, well, you only have 60 pins. But guess what? You know, those 59 pins or those 58 pins or so you get, you could use those if you're. Oh, here's my microphone. Oh, that's why. Damn cat. Cat chewed it. That makes sense now. Alright, sorry about that. My microphone just stopped working, but it's back on now. Now, 70% of 200, it allows bowlers with lower averages to get what they need, but it also prevents sandbagging. Okay? But yes, if the handicap is 90%, 70% of 200, that's pretty much like designed for casual bowlers, and yeah, but they won't get as much as you think. 70% of 200 actually, in my opinion, would probably be a little better than 90% of 250, because those who average over 200 won't get anything, but those who will average significantly less than 200, they're only going to get so much. And don't forget, with a maximum of 60 pins per game, that's going to prevent sandbagging. And yes, there is a difference between sandbagging and... Oh, my camera. Hang on. There we go. Sorry. Everything just plugged up. Everything just went out. Shit. Don't forget, with that kind of maximum handicap, no one's going to be taking advantage completely. Now, yes, there is a difference between advantage bowling and sandbagging. I cover that in the advantage bowling video, which you can see somewhere on my channel. Like I said, I'll probably put it up here or in the description or whatever. But yeah. Now, we need to figure out why this is. Why I'm arguing this. And to do that, we need to do a lot of number crunching, and we need to perform a fuck ton of mental gymnastics. So get ready. Okay, here's the agenda going forward. All right, here's what the last half of the video is going to be about. Now, we need to determine what statistics are necessary for which averages. I'm charting 190 all the way to 250. We need to determine exactly how many strikes are necessary and exactly how many opens are allowed for all games 190 to 250, and while exploring as many different combinations as possible. And we need to determine what bowlers of which averages must do to shoot higher than their average. And this is a response to a pretty popular bowling YouTuber named Luke Rosedahl. Rosedahl's pretty cool. He makes some pretty good content, and I will be responding to that later on. But I'm gonna just do it here. I'm not gonna do it like to his video right now, but yeah. So let me go get rid of this. That was just a personal note. I will respond because he has made a video about this too, but whatever, it's different than mine. So you have to determine what bowlers of which averages have to do in order to shoot higher than that average. Okay. Here are the statistics and metrics I'll be using. There are more than just these three, but I keep doing that. Right, not the left hand, not the right hand. There are more than just these three, but these three, for the purposes of this discussion, are going to be the most relevant. The first is strike rate. How many strikes you get per game, and the percentage of strikes you have per game, right? First ball average, how many pins you knock down in your first ball. Neighbors. It's a very crowded neighborhood. Better than my parents, right? Or my folks. And opens per game. How many times you've missed a spare per game, right? Right. Again, there are other stats and metrics, and I will be going over those, by the way, in a later video. But not now. I'll do it later on. Okay, so let's go. But that's what I'm saying. These are going to be I'm going to be focusing on these the most because they're the most conducive to total pinfall when everything is considered. Okay? That's because it's, like I said, spares are included too because it's opens per game. So, alright. Okay. Now, this is going to be just very general numbers. I'm going to explain them all. The first number is strike rate. The second one is first ball, and the last one's opens per game. Got lazy and didn't type them all out, whatever. So for a 190, you can strike as little. Now this is theoretical, not literal. Okay, you can strike as little as 35% of the time to as much as 50% of the time, and average 190. Okay, your first ball average needs to be at least 8.75, and your opens per game at most can be 2.25, so 2.25, so roughly 2 opens a game. Now, this is where spares come into play, right? Because if you strike 50% of the time but have 3 opens in that game, then it's a 190, right? That kind of stuff. So that's something to keep in mind. For 200, it's 37.5 to 52.5 is your strike rate. I've had 200s where I've struck, 5 out of 11 times. I've had 200s where I've struck like 7 times, but I missed like 2 spares, that kind of stuff. And with your first ball average being at least 8.9, and opens at most 2, if not even that, but whatever. Yeah. Okay. Here's how it is for a 210 and 220. So, with 210, your strike rate now needs to be at least in the low 40s for a 210 average. Like, it has to be. There's no... If you... There's no way you can average 210 and strike less than 40% of the time. It's just not going to happen. Like, even if it's perfect, clean game, no opens, like, everything would have to be a single... Like, okay, maybe you could strike... Like I said, like what, 5 out of 12 times? So frames 8 through 10 need to be strikes, right? 5 in a row to close the game out. That's still 5 strikes in a row, you know. And then everything else would be like single pin spares. Okay, maybe that's a 210. That could possibly be a 210. Yeah, that'd probably be like a low 220. But are you going to be able to do that every single time for 36, 72 something games in a row during league? No, they're not going to do that. You know what I mean? So, yeah. So, with 220 now we need so any average over 210. So, 190 through 210 averages, they challenge your spare shooting. So, if you're really good at spares, you can average 190 to 210 pretty easily, okay? Because all you need to average 210 is to strike 45% of the time. That's what, 5-6 strikes a game? Not even, you know? So, can you strike 5 times a game on a house shot? Yeah, you can strike 5 times a game on a house shot. Now, but for averaging 220, now you have to do a little bit more work. And now your spare shooting has to be almost perfect. You can maybe miss 1 spare per game, right? But you have to strike at least 6 times. If you do not strike 6 times in that one game, your 220 is done. And now you're going to see with the last few numbers that the difference between a 230 and a 250 and a 250 and a 270 is literally 1 goddamn strike. It's just one. It's just 1 strike difference between those 3. Okay? But 220 is where the transition begins from being from one to the other. That kind of stuff. Jesus, my roommates are being loud. Good night. Let me go ahead and shut my door here. I need to get some water anyways. Ooh. Oh, it was behind that. There we go. Alright. Okay. Sorry. I was looking for something. But I found it. We're good. I need some water. Alright, there we go. Your intermission's over. Ah, there. I was going to leave my door a little bit open, but guess I should have done that. Okay. Now here's where... So anything over, like I said, anything over 220, like, it's all about strikes, and it's all about at least and at most. There is no range for anything over 230. Like, 220 is where, like, the 220 average is, like, where, like, there's still a range of strike rate, okay? Like, you could strike as little as 47.5% or as much as 6%, still average 220. And 47.5%, you need to cover all of your spares. That's like if you cover literally or practically all of your spares, then, and you only strike a little bit less than half the time, it's a 220 average. But in most cases, you're going to have 1-2 opens a game, so it needs to be about here, 60%, right? Right. Okay, now 230 and 240. If your average is 230, your strike rate is at least 62.5. What's 62.5? So that is, if you can get out a calculator, whatever, you're gonna find that's about 7 strikes a game, at least. 8 is probably ideal because you're gonna miss that one spare, that kind of deal. Same with the first ball average, at least 9.2. So you're not leaving a lot of multiple pins. You're leaving strikes. It's strikes and single pins for a 230 average. And I know bowlers who average 230, and that's what they do. If they don't strike, and they get salty when they leave single pins because those single pins need to be strikes. They need to be those. They need to be strikes. They need to convert. They need to carry. Anyone who averages more than 220, they don't play for the break. They don't play for the breaks, for good breaks. They play for the carry. If they get upset because they didn't carry a good shot or an excellent shot. If you average like 205, okay, my average has been 205 for like the last 15 years almost, okay, just about since 2012. And just recently, my average went under 220 or 205 because I was trying new stuff, new mechanics and stuff like that, right? Okay, so now, but back in those days, now it's different because I want to get a new level, but I still want to average 205. But I know I can average over 220 if I wanted to, because I have the ability, have the tools now. But back when averaging 200 was pretty cool for me in 2012, 13, 14, 15-ish. Around 2016 when I was like, all right, I got to step things up. I wasn't playing to make sure I carried. I was playing to make sure I got a good break. So I'd still make some bad shots, but I would hope that, instead of leaving a 3-6... instead of leaving a 310, I would just leave a 3-pin, that kind of deal. That's kind of that all that changes once you average. Again, I keep doing that. All that changes once you average more than 220. When you average more than 220, now you need to play for the carry. Now your first ball has to carry. If it doesn't carry, it's a bad shot. And that's why they get stressed out. That's why they get salty. That's why they complain about handicap, because they can't take advantage of that handicap because they don't get any. And if they don't carry their really good shot, they are now down by a certain amount of pins. Especially if you're averaging 230, 240, because look at this strike rate. At least 62.5, at least 65. Like, striking more than 60% of the time is not easy. Even with today's equipment, even with today's coaching resources, even with all those kind of resources that we have at our disposal, it is still really difficult to average that kind of numbers. Those numbers are not easy to hit. Like, you need a combination of good shots, excellent shots, and luck to average anything over that. And 250, it's even crazier. 250, you need to average at least 70%. At least 70%. So if you didn't strike 8 times, you're not getting a 250. You're just not. You're just not. It's just not going to happen. 8 strikes, 9 strikes, that's just the way it is. That's just the way it is, And same thing with the first ball average. It has to be almost 9.5. And opens, you get maybe one or two per set, per 3-game set. So it's like I said, for 250 average, for 250 average right there, you see it. You need the following at a minimum. You need 8 strikes a game, 4 or so shots can yield under 9 pins, and it better be 8 counts. You know what I mean? And maybe one open in a 3-game set. Maybe. If you're lucky enough to string strikes together. And the point here is that the numbers don't lie. These numbers do not lie, okay? And you can theorize all you want. you can come up with whatever kind of theories you want. You can come up with, well, today's bowling ball technology makes it easy to strike more. It does. Today's bowling balls make it really easy for anyone to go from knowing absolutely nothing about the game, resources, because it's coaching too. You got free videos on YouTube. I was watching some coaching videos from like the 70s, which are still relevant today on YouTube. High-level bowling balls are pretty cheap nowadays compared to back in the day. Coaching is readily available. Almost any pro bowler does it because they need a side income. Despite all of those resources, despite them all, you have to ask yourself that $50,000 question. Can you reliably strike 8 times a game, which is needed for a 230-plus game, if you average 200? As someone who's averaged over 205 for the last decade or so, I will answer this and say probably not. 5, yes. If you told me, hey, go ahead and strike 15 times in 3 games, cool hand Luke, I can do it. But if you were to say, now strike 24 times in 3 games, that I don't know. I could probably do 18. I could maybe do 21 or so, but anything else like that, it's not going to happen. So, yeah. So if you had 35 or so pins, which is what you'd have if you averaged like 205 and you were given 90% 250, you'd get what? What's 35 pins in the 9th and 10th frame? That's a spare and some change. That's nothing but spares in the 9th and 10th. That's like 37. You'd get if you went 9 spare and then 9 spare 5. That's 35 pins in the 9th and 10th. So if I was given that, and everyone else had, and everyone else had 60 at most, because remember I said we were setting limits there, that kind of stuff, or if it's 70% 200, so I get nothing if I average 205, but everyone else only gets 35, with no one even hitting the 60 mark. So that evens things out. Those suggested handicaps allow bowlers of most skill levels to get as many pins as they need in any situation, no matter what it is. House shot, sports shot, league, tournament, any of those. Sweeper, 8-game sweeper. If you use those handicaps, 90% of 250 if that league has higher average bowlers, or 70% of 200 if you want to cater to the lower average guys, it allows bowlers, again, of most. You cannot make everyone happy. That's the problem with bowling and this kind of stuff, is that we want to please everybody. Let me tell you one thing right now. Right? You can please all the people some of the time, some of the people all the time, but never all the people all the time. In bowling, you can only please some of the people some of the time. That's a very inconvenient truth about it, right? No, I don't think anyone's gonna disagree with me on that. And again, here's the last, and I really want to talk about that last point. Like, do you really need not 80 or 90 pins of handicap if you average 265? Jesus. If you average 165? The answer to that is a hard no. It really is. And I'm going to probably make some people mad saying that. If you average like under 165 and you're just starting out. You're like, man, but I like getting my 89 pins, my 99 pins, my 109 pins of handicap I've seen some of these bowlers get. Ridiculous. Triple-digit handicap. Like, no one should ever get that much. No. 60 is all you need. 60 is the most. That's like I said. If you go off the sheet in 9th and 10th, you get 60 pins. That is the most that any bowler can get. In fact, nobody even needs more than 60 pins, even if they average 100. 100 is 7 to 8 opens a game. So if you cover 2 spares, you get 100. And assuming everything else, assuming your first ball averages like at least 7.5, that kind of deal. So that's what the industry standard of handicap should be. Like, I really want, like, to pitch this to anyone who's significant in the online bowling community because it makes perfect sense. I mean, look, like, again, if you were to tell me that, like, oh, let's have it 90% at 250, and I would say that as a joke, just to troll in online bowling communities. And then I started thinking about it, I'm like, wait a minute. No, this actually makes a lot of sense, but we have to put a limit on it. You put a limit on it, it'll be perfectly fine. It'll be perfect. Because everyone would get what they would need. Everybody would get what they needed. 70% of 200, that's also pretty self-explanatory. There was actually a college bowler, a former college bowler who used to bowl for Weber, who pitched that to me when I bowled in this, and when I bowled at KBK a few months ago. Again, shout out to Curtis. And he was pitching for 70% of 200, and I'm like, really? That low? And I'm like, yeah, that low. Makes perfect sense because these bowlers who average, substantially low, they'll get everything they need, but they won't get too much to where a scratch bowler will feel like they have to shoot like 250, 270 just to maybe catch up, But I still think, in my opinion, I'd be more of a fan of 90% of 250 with a 60 pin limit per game. That would be really nice. I'd like that a lot. And I think if we started incorporating that as a handicap, as an industry standard for bowling handicap, then I think the majority of bowlers would be way happier, because scratch bowlers would be like, okay, that's cool, as long as they're getting a maximum of 60. But then someone else who isn't as scratch would still be able to be like, yeah, I can roll with that. So that's it. That, for me, in my opinion, that's my stupid bowling opinion about what I think the industry standard of handicap and bowling should be. Sorry about my roommates getting all loud. I didn't expect that at all. I hope it doesn't go on all night because I gotta get some sleep. I might actually redo this video. We'll see. But I just wanted to get this first copy of it out there, I guess. All right. Again, good luck during the second half, everybody. Thank you for watching. Even if you disagree, don't worry about it. If you like my work, if you watched this and you enjoyed my work, you know what to do. I don't sell that because it's dumb. I'm not like every other bowling. Oh, God. Here, a little quick little rant to any bowling YouTubers. Don't beg your viewers to subscribe and like. Your viewers aren't stupid, okay? If they enjoy your work, they know what to do. They see the like button. They see the subscribe button. They see the dumbass bell. Don't worry about any of that crap. Just tell them, if you like my work, you know what to do. Go do it. That's my opinion anyways. It's stupid YouTube opinion. Alright, I'm out of here. I'm about to get some sleep if I can. Because hard day at the gym today, so I gotta get some rest. Alright, take care everybody.